Welcome back to Kiss the Badge. Great to have you here for another pod. This is the pod that plays football with its collar up. I don't have a collar on this shirt if you're watching, but normally we play with our collar up. We always play with our chest out, and we play with Football Heritage as our sleeve sponsor. Thank you so much for being here for another pod. It's so great that you are here and that you're enjoying the podcast. I'm getting a lot of messages from you to that effect. You're enjoying them, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for those comments and for those messages and for being here and listening right now. If you haven't done already, because this is the way that things get done these days is online, is by social media. And so I would really appreciate you guys and girls giving me a follow on those platforms that we are on. So that's TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube particularly. I am now doing full episodes of Kiss the Badge on YouTube in visual form. So if you're someone who likes to watch your podcasts, I don't personally, I like to listen, but if you are someone who likes to watch along, which can be quite helpful, you know, if we're talking about a particular shirt, like the one I've got on today, this Juventus training top, you know, you can see it in visual form, and that's always handy. You know, we might talk about bobbleheads from the 90s, as we already have done on this series. Then you can see those as well. So good to watch along. So on YouTube, do subscribe to the channel. That's the thing you've got to do there. The channel is Kiss the Badge. So just search it up on YouTube and it will come up. On TikTok and Instagram, we are at Kiss the Badge Pod. So do get involved on those platforms as well. But as always, if you're not somebody who likes to do social media, you can email as well. We've got an email address. So the email address is kissthebadgepod@gmail.com. So whatever your preference of getting in touch, there is a method for you. Now, as you know, this is not a football news podcast, and I'm not going to talk about the football news at great length. However, you can see this shirt behind me here. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that one later. But as a Manchester United fan, it would be remiss of me. Is that the word? Yeah, I think that's the word. To not take a moment. We're 2-2 under Michael Carrick. What is going on? And more to the point, what was Ruben Amorim doing all this time? I just don't understand quite what's changed. Michael Carrick, I mean, what can he have done in 2 weeks? But I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, it's worked. And Manchester United look a completely different prospect under him. You know, it helps that some of his squad are back. You know, Amorim, for the end of his tenure at United, did not have some of his biggest players. You know, he didn't have Harry Maguire. He didn't have Matthias de Ligt. He didn't have Mbumo. He didn't have Ahmad, Mazraoui. Mount was out for a lot of time. Bruno Fernandes was injured for a month. All those players minus Matthias de Ligt are now back, and I think that is helping. You're seeing Manchester United now as the fans would want to see them, playing attacking football, playing the youth, giving Kobbie Mainoo a chance. You know, you've seen in 2 games what Kobbie Mainoo is capable of. I said this last week. Amorim lost me a little bit when he went after Mainoo, and when he said Mainoo will only play if Bruno Fernandes is not fit, you know, that they were competing. They can play together. The last 2 games have shown that. And I just think Manchester United are all about youth. We're all about courage. We're all about success. You're seeing those 3 things. Well, not success yet. Well, kind of. 2-2, Michael Carrick. So we are seeing success. Short-term success, of course. It still remains to be seen if he can do it in the long term, but signs are good. However, as I always say, I'm not a football news podcast, so if you're here for that, you're in the wrong place. There's people doing it far better than I can. One thing that I can bring you is football nostalgia. You know, a little look back at the good old days, the football shirts, the players, the games, the goals, the moments that made the 90s so special, that made the 2000s so special. And we're going to move on now to a section of the pod that I debuted last week. I quite liked, and the section is called, At Least It's Not a Gambling Sponsor. And this week's episode of Kiss the Badge is brought to you by TY. Is it TY or is it Ty? You know the one. That brand, the heart with the TY in it. They're the sponsor of today's pod, and they are brought to you in association with Portsmouth Football Club in 2002. Now, do you remember this shirt sponsor? Because I forgot it happened. But when I was doing a bit of research on some of the more rogue shirt sponsors, the more bizarre unions between club and sponsor that we've had over the years, and this was on all the lists because TY, I'm going to call them TY. I don't know if it's Ty, but when I was young, I used to call them TY. And they were toy manufacturer. They used to make little teddy bears called Beanie Babies. Does anybody remember these Beanie Babies? In the mid 90s to late 90s, these were a craze. Everybody was buying them. I say everybody. I wasn't buying them. I wasn't particularly into teddy bears personally, but my younger sister, on the other hand, absolutely obsessed. One year for her birthday, we went to a service station in Taunton. It was like a Premier Inn at a service station. They have a conference room at a lot of these places. We went there. Or no, it was more like an event space, like a hall in a Premier Inn in Taunton, as you do. It was probably 1998, something like that. And we went there because they had a TY Beanie Baby conference or gathering where people could go and swap and buy Beanie Babies. It was meant, all these people were so obsessed. I got dragged along because at that age, I was 7, 8 years old, whatever I was, and you sort of just got to go where your parents go. I had no interest in being there. But these people, people were obsessed with them. Adults as well, not just kids. I mean, kids did go crazy for them. My sister had a big collection of these Beanie Babies. But I remember my mum got into them a bit as well, and lots of adult women were queuing to get into places when they opened for this new batch of Beanie Babies. It was so weird. It's they were literally just little teddy bears, and inside there was little bauble things that made them like bean bags, but in teddy bear form, if you like. And they did lots of special ones. I remember they did one when Diana died, and it was called the Princess Bear. And I think now they are worth a lot of money, those ones, the Diana ones. But again, with all these things, a bit like, where are they? Here they are. Look, the Sainsbury's Final Five coins from the 90s. We've talked about these before. You buy these things when you're younger thinking they're going to be worth a lot of money. And a lot of the time they're not. These were not. And these BP cards definitely were not. But some of the Beanie Babies have held their value, I think. I looked online, and to get the Diana one that I mentioned, the Princess Bear, some of them go for $100,000. Imagine buying that back in the day for 200 quid, and now it's worth $100,000. You could buy a house with that, with the money from a Beanie Baby. I never understood the hype anyway. Apparently, it was the first product considered to have gone viral online because TY or Ty, however you pronounce it, were the first company to mass sell products online, or one of them anyway. They're sort of lumped in with being among the first in that way. And I mean, like I say, I never got into it, but I do remember. We are a football shirt podcast, I promise. I do remember that they sponsored Portsmouth Football Club for 3 seasons. So from 2002 to 2005, TY or Ty, I'm just gonna say TY because that's what I used to call it. It's probably wrong, but that's what I'm going with. TY, they were the sponsors of Portsmouth Football Club. And they even had one of the stands at Fratton Park named after their brand. So one of the stands was called the TY Europe stand. They were the sponsor when Portsmouth spent their first season in the Premier League. This was the era of Yakubu, of Teddy Sheringham, David James, all of that. Teddy Sheringham and Yakubu actually had a very good year that year. 29 goals between the two of them. Teddy Sheringham, of course, right at the, in the sunset years of his illustrious career, but he was at Portsmouth, did very well, got them a lot of goals in the Premier League. After 3 games of that 2002-2003 season, Portsmouth, who'd just come up, were top of the table. And they actually ended the season with a fairly respectable 13th place finish. They weren't pulling up trees necessarily, but they had a great start to the season, great end to the season. In between, it was a bit meh. But either end, 13th, not bad for a team that had never been in the Premier League before. However, this shirt sponsor is actually not known for being worn by a Portsmouth player at all. It's most well known for being worn by Thierry Henry. That's right, Thierry Henry, the Arsenal forward, is perhaps the footballer who is most associated with this shirt sponsor, because in 2004, Arsenal went to Fratton Park. They beat Portsmouth 5-1. Henry played in the game, and there are images that have become very famous of Henry wearing the shirt at the end of the game. He swapped shirts with Loire. Do you remember Loire? Well, him and Thierry Henry swapped shirts. Henry put the shirt on the pitch, and Portsmouth fans loved him for it and love him for it to this day. There's a real affinity between Henry and Portsmouth Football Club. Thierry Henry is quoted as saying that he put the shirt on the pitch and applauded the Portsmouth fans to give something back to them, because throughout that game, they had been clapping Henry, giving him a good reception, cheering his name. And so he decided to put the shirt on and give them a memory they would never forget. And they have never forgotten it, because they remember him for it, and he is known for it still to this day. I'm a little bit skeptical, right? Because Fratton Park's not a massive stadium. I would imagine that the away fans in that stadium would be able to be quite well heard. You know what I mean? They're probably a decent chunk of the crowd in total. And so I'm wondering if what Henry was actually hearing was just the Arsenal fans. You know? I mean, would Portsmouth fans, if you're watching this and you were there, let me know. Were you actually cheering and clapping Henry? Because I find it quite hard to believe. I don't know. I think maybe Henry's got the wrong end of the stick, and for some reason now he's in love with Portsmouth Football Club and they're in love with him. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm all here for it. Football's all about love and all about mutual respect, you know? So maybe this is a good thing, but I don't know. I just feel like maybe Henry got the wrong end of the stick there myself. Right, now we come to the main crux of the podcast, our main topic, if you like. I haven't got a name for this section yet. I really should think of one. But today we're going to be talking about shirt collecting, because actually the majority of the messages I get related to Kiss the Badge and, you know, from people that I know as well, the majority of those messages are about collecting football shirts, which for me is a massive hobby. It's a big part of my life. It's something I really love doing. I really enjoy. And I wonder if I enjoy it now, because back in the day when I was young, obviously I wasn't able to do it. I didn't have a lot of money. We as a family didn't have a ton of money. There was some. But, you know, football shirts were a real treat. I remember getting them for like Christmas and birthday presents, and they were always really well received by me, of course, as a young football fan, you know. And it didn't have to be United shirts. Of course, I am a Manchester United fan. But, you know, any shirt I was given, I was so grateful for it, because it was a little piece of football that I had and that it was mine. And my first ever shirt that I got was a Manchester United shirt. It was the famous grey shirt from the 95-96 season. It was worn most famously perhaps in two games. First one being the opening game of that season for Manchester United, which was the away game against Villa. Manchester United lost 3-1, and on Match of the Day that night, Alan Hansen uttered the immortal words, "You can't win anything with kids." They wore it one other time that season, a 3-1 defeat again at the Dell. What a ground the Dell was, by the way. We're not going to get into that today, but one of the iconic football stadia of the 90s. I don't know if you really call it a stadia. It was tiny. Everybody who played there said it felt like the crowd was right on top of you. So it was quite an intense atmosphere, as Manchester United found out on that day. They lost 3-1. I think they were 3-0 down at half-time wearing that shirt, the grey shirt. And so Alex Ferguson told them, get that shirt off at half-time, and they all took it off. They changed to their third shirt, the blue and white one, because the players were complaining they couldn't see each other against that intense Dell crowd. So this shirt is, you know, it's known, it's synonymous with defeat for Manchester United, but it's iconic because of that random instance in which they had to change out of it. I don't know if that's ever happened again or before or since in football. Has a team ever changed shirts at half time? I don't know if they have, but they did that day. I wasn't set on United shirts. You know, of course, I was a Manchester United fan, but I would happily receive a Barcelona shirt or a Juve shirt. I watched a lot of Champions League football back in the day with Manchester United being in it. And so whenever shirts from that competition came my way, they were gratefully received. I remember having a 1998 to 2000 Barcelona shirt with Rivaldo on the back. I'd love to try and get hold of that one in an adult size, because that was a unbelievable shirt. I had that one. I had a Juventus shirt as well from around 2002, I think it was. So I, even back then, I had an eye for a football shirt bargain. I had an eye for a collection, maybe starting to build, but I never had any disposable income. And so it was always more of an ambition. And so I think later in life now, I have a disposable income, a modest amount, but I have something. And so I do buy and collect and, curate, if that's the right word, a football shirt collection just for myself. I wear some of them I don't wear. We'll come on to that. But that's one of my hobbies. I'm a football shirt collector. That's part of the reason I started this podcast as well, to talk about it, because my wife's sick of hearing about it. She doesn't really want to know. And so I thought I'd find some more people to talk about it with, and that's you. I'm somebody who I like to have the real deal. So most, if not all, of the shirts you will see me wear, no, all, actually, I don't have any fakes that I wear. In fact, I've got one fake, which is it's a Holland shirt from Euro 88, the speckly orange one, the famous Van Basten shirt, if you want to call it that. It's not real. It's completely fake. And I got it on a whim from a market in Amsterdam. And I shouldn't have done, because it's a fake and I don't buy fakes. But I slipped up that day. I got drawn in by the price tag. It was like €9, I think. I'd had a couple of Heinekens that day and I thought, €9, I could wear that to the gym. I've still got it. I should just get rid of it because I'm not for fakes. All the other shirts I own are real. I love to have the authentic thing, the real deal. I like to know when I've got a football shirt on my body that, for example, I've got this one here you can see behind me. This is a 1992 to 1994 Manchester United home shirt, which was worn by them when they won their first Premier League title in 92-93 season. And this is real. This is a real shirt. This is one of my favourites that I have in my collection, and I'll never get rid of it. And part of the reason is I love knowing that this shirt was there. Like when United won that title in 92-93, this shirt was there. Somebody was wearing it, celebrating that title then in the moment. This isn't a remake that somebody has reproduced just for a bit of money, and it's not a reissue that the manufacturer, which was Umbro, did in hindsight because the shirt was popular. No, this is a real shirt. When you're living those times, when you live in the good days, the good old days, if you like, you don't know they are the good old days. You only know that with hindsight. And so that's why now I think a lot of people buy football shirts and put them away, because one day we might look back and go, oh, those were the good old days. But at the time, people didn't know this was the good old days. And so to own a piece of the good old days, if you like, I just think it's so special. So on this side of me, we've got a real vintage football shirt, which is what I'm all about. And on this side of me, you see the Real Madrid shirt right here. By the way, if you're listening to this on Spotify and you can't see the shirts and you want to see what I'm talking about, head over to YouTube right now and search up Kiss the Badge, and you can watch full episodes of the pod, and you can see me talking right now, and you can see the shirts that we're talking about. On my right is the Manchester United shirt from 1992, and on this side of me we've got a Real Madrid shirt from 1999, and this one right here is a reissue that was done by Adidas, and it was a popular shirt back in the day, but people have come to love it. It's got a great look to it. It's very flowy. It's very, it sits quite baggy, and it's a very popular shirt from back in the day. Of course, you can buy the real deal, but the reissues are very nice. They're of good quality, and so I thought I'd pick myself up one. I've got them on this side. To be honest, I'm not against reissues of football shirts. They're not my priority. I think if I see one that looks really good, I would get it. I get it for fashion purposes, and these ones, I wouldn't be scared to wear them. Some of these vintage ones, like this Manchester United shirt right here, I would be a little bit scared to wear. So I have got some reissues. I've got this Real Madrid one, which is mine. I've got you may have seen me in some of my content wearing a 1978 Peru shirt. That's a reissue. That's not the real deal. A lot of people in the comments have loved that shirt, by the way, the Peru one. But that is a reissue that Adidas did. Again, it looked really good. I'm not buying it and claiming it's the real deal. I buy the reissues to wear them, But the vintage shirts, not all of those are going to be shirts that I'm brave enough to wear, if I'm being honest with you. I think nothing beats 90s vintage for me. And 2000s vintage is also very nice. I'm wearing a 2000s vintage training top right now. So 2000s has a place, but my heart and my upbringing and my football education was the 90s, as I've mentioned in previous pods. So for me, there's just nothing better than a shirt that was there in the 90s, worn by the fans, the real deal. They are more expensive, of course. For this kind of shirt right here, you're looking at hundreds of pounds. You're certainly not going to get one for under £100, I wouldn't imagine. Certainly one in good condition. So that, they are something of an investment, if you like. I always joke with people that I buy so many football shirts because I'm an investor. I like to have them because they're going to make me money one day. To be honest, that's not really true. I'm not going to sell the shirts, so they're not going to make me money. It's a bit of an excuse to buy football shirts. Say you get a shirt from 1996 that was 30 quid back then, and now it's worth 150. That's what's that? A 300, 400% increase on your investment. So it's, if you want to think of it that way, it isn't necessarily throwing money down the drain to buy football shirts. If you're going to invest, don't invest in bricks and mortar, invest in football shirts. And it's much more fun. Somebody asked me the other day if they're an investment and if it's something where, they never depreciate in value, they only go up and all of this. Is that true of shirts that are made now? So, a 2025 Manchester United home shirt, are we going to see that go up in value over the years? The answer is sadly probably not, because shirts that were made in the 90s, particularly for niche football clubs, I own a Plymouth Argyle shirt from 1996, they were made on very small production runs, and even for the bigger clubs like Manchester United, nothing like the amount of production that's going in now. Now it's mass production, millions of units being made and sold. So there's a lot more modern shirts in circulation. Of course, over the years, a lot of them get lost to damage or all those different things. But, there's always going to be more of the modern stuff than there is the old stuff from back in the day. So if you're keeping your modern shirts thinking they'll be worth something one day, honestly, if you want my advice, I probably wouldn't bother. I'd probably just wear them and enjoy them, because there's so many of them out there now that in 30 years, they're not really going to be worth much, but they might have a sentimental tie for you. The Manchester United beat Arsenal a couple of days ago, right? In the black shirt from this season. And it's a really nice shirt. It's a bit of a take on the 1994 shirt of Kung Fu Kick fame. And in that shirt, United beat Arsenal the other day, 3-2, epic game, one for the ages for the fans. I'm probably going to buy that shirt. And I'm not just going to buy it because I like the look of it. I'm probably going to buy it now because it has that memory attached to it. Forevermore, I will pick up that shirt from my clothes rail and I will say, oh yeah, remember when Cunha scored that late winner? And for me, still now, that is what football shirt collecting is all about. Yes, it's about fashion, and yes, it's about what looks good and what you feel good in as well. But over and above all of that, a shirt has to have some historic substance for me. That is what football is all about, and that's why I do this podcast and why I collect football shirts. It's all about memories, and it's all about the good times that we've had as football fans. Also, back in the day, people didn't really collect football shirts. People did wear them as sports garments. They weren't collectibles as such. And that's why the majority of shirts you buy now that are vintage won't be in the best condition. It's very rare that you get a mint condition, sort of 10 out of 10 shirt from the 90s. They're always going to have some defects. But again, I think that just adds to the charm of them. They have a story. They had an owner who wore them to games and to five-a-side and all of that. And that forms part of that garment story. So then you've got, you can just tell it was there. I keep saying it. I love that the football shirts that I buy, the vintage ones, they were there. And all the little blemishes and the little hooks and the little, bits of material that are, not in as good a condition as they were when they were made, they add to that history. And I think these days, a lot of people buy football shirts and they keep them back and they put them away and they, save them so that one day they'll be worth something. I really don't think it's worth it. So many people are doing that in 20, 30 years, you probably are going to get a lot of mint condition Manchester United 2025 black shirts because loads of people did it. You know, it's more of a thing to collect football shirts these days. There's more of an online community. The more that I do this and the more that I put my football shirt collection out there to people and I talk to people, I realize there's a whole world of people that are interested in this. You know, this isn't niche anymore. I think in the 90s, football shirts were for playing football in. Now, yes, they're that, but they also are for looking good in. They're also for collecting. They've taken on a whole new world, and I'm here for it. The biggest question I get asked when it comes to my vintage shirts from the 90s and 2000s is, do I wear them? The answer to that is this. Some of them, yes, not all of them. For example, this shirt right here, I couldn't wear it out. I just couldn't. Because for me, if I was to wear that out, and I'd probably only wear it on a special occasion because it is a special shirt. You know, it's got great monetary value, yes, but its historical value and its sentimental value to me is even more than the monetary value. So if I was to wear it out and spill a pint down it or spill some food down it or, I don't know, get in a fight in a pub with a Liverpool fan and they rip it, I'd be gutted. I would be devastated. And yeah, I'll be real. I probably couldn't afford to replace this shirt because it is worth quite a lot of money. You know, I think my rule is if I could bear to see it ruined or destroyed, then I'm happy to wear it. You know, for example, I've got a really nice Ajax shirt from 1993. Really beautiful shirt. Looks good on me as well. It's a great design. It's the classic Ajax design. It's in really good condition. I bought it from Classic Football Shirts last year, and I've got that shirt. I would wear that shirt out. Because if I was to ruin it, yes, it's expensive, but A, I could get another one. And B, if I didn't want to get another one, I'd be sad, but I wouldn't be heartbroken. I think if I ruined some of my shirts, for example, this one right here, as I keep talking about, I would be heartbroken. I'd be really gutted about that. So it varies shirt to shirt. You know, I buy them to wear them for the most part. You know, that's what they're for. They're clothes. When you break everything else down, they are clothing garments. I won't be able to take them with me. You know, that's the thing to remember. You know, as great as they are, I'm not going to be able to take them with me. Maybe I'll be buried in this one. If you're watching this in the future and I'm long gone, can somebody just check in and make sure that this shirt right here was my burial garment of choice? And don't be digging me up to try and get it. It's mine. I like to wear them out, the vintage ones, because I think, you know, when I see somebody else with a vintage football shirt on, when I'm out and about, it sort of sparks conversation, usually with my wife, although she's not interested. But whoever you're with, you know, you see a vintage football shirt out, you take them right there. You know, if you see the bruised banana, somebody wearing it, you go, oh yeah, remember that in 89, Mickey Thomas. You know, if you see the grey England shirt from Euro 96, you go, oh, remember when Gaza missed that chance? You know, you're against Germany. You're taken there. It starts conversations. It sparks memories. And I like that. I respect owners of vintage football shirts who wear them out because, you know, it's not just for your enjoyment, it's for everyone else's too. And I quite like that. You know, I like to think that when I'm walking down the street in, well, for example, this one that I've got on today, this is we'll talk about this later. It's a mid to early noughties Juventus training top. And I like to think that when I'm walking along, somebody sees it and they go, oh yeah, look at that. Remember that Juventus side with Del Piero and Buffon? You know, I like that. I think I'm here to serve. And if I could walk down the street with a vintage shirt on and spark a conversation for one of you, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be completely honest here now as well. On this note, right? Yes, it sparks conversation. And yes, sometimes the shirts look good on. And that's why it's nice to go to places like Classic Football Shirts and try them on. But I've got to be real. I do admit that sometimes to wear a vintage football shirt out, it's a bit of a flex. And I'm not proud of it, but I quite like doing that. You know, people see you with a vintage shirt on, and I don't care about the money side. That's not important to me. I like the fact that people might see me with a vintage shirt on and go, wow, look at that. That's niche. That guy knows his stuff. If he's got that shirt on, he knows his football. And I do quite... I shouldn't admit it. I do quite like it. It's not a financial flex for me at all. It's more of a that guy knows ball flex, you know? But over and above all that, to be honest, for me, football shirts, it's all about I love 90s football and I want to have a piece of it. That's what it's all about. I keep saying 90s football. As you know by now, if you're a regular follower or regular listener, that's my passion project, if you like. That's the part of history that I'm most interested in. The 2000s were also a very special time for me. I think football started to lose its allure in the 2010s. And certainly in the 2020s, a game's gone, I think. Of course, you still love your team. But for me, those are the time periods that I'm most interested in. But when I say 90s, I kind of mean 90s and 2000s. That's my era. I said that I would wear the football shirts I buy, the vintage ones. There's some that I won't wear out. This one right here is one of them, as I said. I discussed on the pod last week, and I wore a Plymouth Argyle shirt from 1996. It was from their Division 3 playoff against Darlington. They wore the shirt, and it was the first football match, second football match I ever went to. Plymouth also wore the shirt in the first football match I ever went to, which was a FA Cup tie against Coventry City, Premier League Coventry City, at Home Park, and they wore that shirt. And a few years ago, I saw one on Classic Football Shirts that they don't come up. They're very, very, very rare. But I saw one and I bought it. Again, I would never wear that shirt out because for me, that's a part of... That one has real sentimental value for me anyway. But those ones that are rare, that are harder to replace, I just can't bring myself to wear it. Even if I didn't spill something down it, in wearing it, you're getting it all sweaty and you're getting all your skin cells all over it. Those types of ones, they're for looking at. You get them out of the wardrobe every now and again. You look at them, you maybe put them on in front of the mirror and check that they still fit or whatever. And then you put them back. You don't wear them out of the house. I couldn't wear that Plymouth shirt out of the house because if something happened to it, I'll never forgive myself. I think rare comes into it. I mentioned that Plymouth shirt's quite a rare one. Plymouth Argyle shirts weren't mass-produced, really, on the level of Manchester United in the 90s or anything like that. So there's far fewer of those shirts out there. So to have it, it's a rare piece. And I really do. I like having things that are rare, I think if someone held 2 football shirts up in front of me and said, you can have one of these shirts, this one's the rarest, I would be tempted by that comment. I like rare things. And I think it's okay to keep rare things back, and just keep them nice. If you had a first edition Harry Potter, for example, you wouldn't read it, would you? You would buy, a modern edition of Harry Potter, you'd read that one, and you'd put the first edition on a shelf to look at every now and again, but you wouldn't read it. You wouldn't want to ruin the pages or anything like that, Same thing applies to football shirts. You've got to be very careful with those vintage, rare classics. And do you know what blows my mind? Some people, and I have seen them, some people go to Five-A-Side and wear like a 90s vintage Dortmund top, a real one. And I've seen people do it. And it blows my mind every time. Some people wear them to the gym. I went to the gym the other day and somebody had on a 1996 Zinedine Zidane France top in the gym. They were doing the cross trainer. They were on the cross trainer and they had this France top on. And I said to him, that's a nice shirt, that. I said, is it real? And he said, yeah, of course. And I couldn't believe it. I wanted to say to him, what are you doing? Take that off. Take that off now and wear some Under Armour or something, I can't compute that something like that would be worn to the gym. To be honest, I wouldn't wear any of my regular football shirt collection to the gym. I've got like 4 or 5 football shirts that I'd wear to the gym, or that I do wear to the gym, and that I would wear to Five-A-Side. I've got a 2015-16 Manchester United Juan Mata shirt. That one gets a lot of outings at Five-A-Side. I've also got a Dortmund shirt from 2015, which I actually bought in Dortmund when I went to a game. There's certain ones that I kind of cycle through and they've become like the acceptable Five-A-Side shirts. But I'm not wearing that to Five-A-Side, or that, to be fair. If they're in the collection, you're not wearing to Five-A-Side. And if you do that, you need to give your head a wobble. All right, they're not for Five-A-Side anymore. And you get different types of shirt collectors as well. You get people like me who are proper nostalgics. You get people who are into collecting match-worn shirts. You get people that are like one-man clubs. They just buy all of the shirts for their club and they get it every season. I know I listen to a lot of Josh Widdicombe on different podcasts. I think it's very funny. And I remember him saying once that he buys the Plymouth Argyle shirt every season without fail. He has it, and he has the whole collection of all of them. And some people do that. Some people are one-player men, not one-man players, one-player men's. One-player men's, that's a weird phrasing. You get what I'm trying to say. Someone who's into Cristiano Ronaldo, they just buy all the Ronaldo shirts. Like every club he goes to, they get all the shirts. Some people are a bit more unhinged. They just buy whatever they see. If they see one, they just get it, Oh, it's a football shirt. It's cheap. Let's get it. I'm about nostalgia. I'm not a one club man in that sense. I will wear football shirts from other clubs. I couldn't wear football shirts from other English clubs that are particularly Premier League clubs. In fact, any English club other than Manchester United or Plymouth Argyle, I have a soft spot for them. But no other club in England would I wear the shirt of. Clubs overseas, everyone has their favourites. I collect shirts based on the nostalgia factor. The look of them as well does come into it, of course. The fit of them. I love going in and trying on shirts, and we'll come onto this in a bit where you can buy them from. But, that's a big factor. But it's not just about the look. For me, it's, I've mentioned it many times. It's the memory that's attached to a shirt. And one really good example of that, I've got upstairs the England 2020 shirt that they wore at Euro 2020, the one with the Italy final, the one that was in the UK, and everyone thought it was coming home and all those things. I went to the Germany game of that Euros. I was there, and it was a special day because it was the first time since COVID that we'd all been able to gather and watch a football match together. It was the biggest legal gathering of human beings in about 18 months, I think, in the UK or something along those lines. And I was there, and it was so special. Wembley was only half full, and that was the shirt we wore that day. I remember it very well. We gathered outside Wembley early. We all had to go in and show our COVID tests and all of that. There's a whole process. Oh, I've just knocked my David Beckham bobble figure over. But I had to buy that shirt because, for me, that was a special day. I think of the Sterling goal, the Muller miss. Remember the Muller miss? There were so many moments in that game. The Harry Kane winner. We don't beat Germany at Wembley. We haven't done since 1966. That was the first time. And so I had to have that shirt. Now, it's not a particularly spectacular England shirt, but I had to have it for the memory, for the nostalgia, and for the moment that I shared with 30, 40,000 other England fans inside Wembley that day. So it's not just about the look. The look helps, of course it does, but it's not just about the look. One thing, I've never been a match-worn shirt guy. I've never collected those. I would love, and one of my ambitions is to own a match-worn Manchester United shirt. Because I just think for me, to own a shirt that has been worn on the pitch at Old Trafford by a Manchester United player, I think that would be such a special thing, because then throughout the rest of your life, you can go back and you can watch that game, because all the games now are online. We can watch whatever we want to see from the past, and you'll be able to go back and watch that game and see your shirt in a game at Old Trafford for your team. I don't think it gets better than that. So I am on the lookout. That's one of my ambitions. It has been since I was little. I've always wanted to own a match-worn Manchester United shirt. One day it's going to happen. Here's hoping. But that whole world of collecting match-worn shirts, that's a whole thing in and of itself. There are people that do that. I saw a clip the other day of a fella who collects match-worn Pele shirts. You think about the money involved in that. That's a whole thing. He didn't just have one. I mean, you'd be grateful to get one. He had loads of them, loads of Pele shirts. I think he had a match-worn Maradona as well. Unbelievable. Like, if you want to do that, fill your boots. I don't have the money for that. I'd love to do it. I barely have the money to do the collecting that I do now, but we make it work. You find time and you find money for the things you enjoy. Football shirt collecting for me is something that I really enjoy, so we make it work. I'll tell you what I do find quite sad about the match-worn space, though. Often when you see match-worn shirts being sold, sometimes it's by like ex-players who've fallen on hard times and need to sell their old shirts and their medals and stuff. I always think that's quite sad, particularly players who played football in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. The only difference between them and players now is they played football at the wrong time for money. Money came into the game with the invention of the Premier League. It was still a little while later until the money got quite serious with TV money and all of that in more recent times. So the only problem these guys had, it wasn't that they mismanaged their money or any of that. So of course, some of them did. But for the majority, they're selling their shirts because they played football in the wrong era. If they're playing football now, they wouldn't have to sell their shirts. They'd have plenty of money to last them and their family a whole lifetime. So that's the only thing about the match-worn shirt space that I find quite sad when you see ex-players selling their shirts. I quite like it. Sometimes you hear stories about rich people that buy ex-players' shirts and then just give them back to the player almost as a thank you. I like it when we see that. Right, let's talk about fakes. My answer is no. I don't do fakes. I don't like fakes. As I said, I got swayed once by buying a fake from a market in Amsterdam. Never again. It wasn't a particularly good quality shirt. I just bought it because I don't know why I bought it, to be honest, but I did. And on the whole, I don't do it because in fact, there's loads of reasons. First of all, that shirt wasn't there. If you're putting it on and you buy a cheap Holland 88 shirt and it's clearly a fake like I did, you wear it and you go, this wasn't there. This didn't see Van Basten score the goal. This was made by somebody that wanted to make a quick buck. It's probably going to break. It will start falling apart in the wash. The letters will start blending together when you wash it on a too hot a wash. Any of that kind of... They're not made to last. And often, a lot of the money that is made from fake shirts, however good they look, a lot of the money that people make off the back of them goes into things like organised crime. And so there is... we don't know, of course, once we've bought it, where that money's going. Football shirts are expensive. It's not... If you want to buy a shirt for your young kid who's into football, but you can't afford it, I can see why it would be tempting to buy a fake. But I'd still say try not to do it if you can help it. If you have to save up really hard, do it. It will be worth it because they'll have a football shirt that was there and that was real and that will last and that is a genuine piece, like the players are wearing. And I think there's something special in that as well. And they make it hard as well for people trying to find authentic ones online. We'll talk in a minute about different places you can buy them, but there's so many fakes out there that they flood the market a little bit, and it makes it hard for people like me who are looking for a bargain on eBay or Vinted or whatever to figure out what's real and what isn't. They flood the market and they ruin the fun of buying football shirts. And they won't last. They break, they don't fit properly, they don't look as good. Just don't do it. Right, where to buy football shirts? Again, something I get asked a lot on this channel, and when I meet you guys out and about, people are always saying, where's the best place to buy football shirts? Where do you get all yours? Here's my tips. Number one, it's an obvious one, classic football shirts. For me, they are the holy grail of football shirt sellers, authentic vintage football shirts, every single one of them. You will get reissues, of course, that they sell, but they're marked as reissues. They're not put there to deceive you and try and make you think you're buying something that you're not. If they're selling reissues, they tell you it's a reissue, and everything else they sell is genuine, and it's genuine. They authenticate everything. Everything they sell is genuine, and so you get that assurance that if you're buying a shirt from Classic Football Shirts, it's the real deal. Now, the problem with that, of course, is you're going to pay more money. They are a little bit more expensive from Classic Football Shirts, particularly the vintage ones. But if you've ever been to their store, it's a beautifully overwhelming experience. The first time I went to the store in London, it's the only one I've been to, I walked in the doors and I was completely overwhelmed. There are hundreds, if not thousands of football shirts in there, and you don't know where to start. And the thing to do there is just take your time, put an hour aside and just go through all of them. Look at all the shirts, try different things on. That's the beauty of the Classic Football Shirts store as well. By the way, just want to say, absolutely not a sponsored pod. Classic Football Shirts are my dream sponsor. So if anybody from Classic Football Shirts is watching or listening to this and they want to work with me, please get in touch. I would be glad to take your call. But this is not sponsored. I am just a massive, massive fan. I have been shopping with them pretty much since they started, and I'll probably never stop. So even if you don't sponsor me Classic Football Shirts, you've got a customer for life, I'm afraid. It's thousands of shirts. They got a bigger set of shirts online as well. So that what you see in the stores is not what you'll find online. They're different stocks. And if they don't have something in stock online or in the shop, they probably will eventually. You know, they're always getting new things in. So it's the mecca, if you want to call it that, of football shirt stores. You know, for me, it's the only place to go for football shirts. Their customer service is pretty good. I had a shirt that I had to return once because some of the letters were peeling off. Never happened. It's only happened the one time, but it did. And they dealt with it. They gave me a full refund, and they even found me another shirt of similar quality level to buy with the refund if I wanted to, which I did. And that's another thing they do as well. They grade their football shirts. So you will get a rating on there out of 10 as to the quality level. So, you know, it will show you on the website, for example, it will show you where the blemish is and where the little pulls are in the shirt and all that kind of stuff. They're all listed there, and it gives you a rating out of 10. You can get some real bargains. You know, if you're willing to buy a shirt that's like a 5 or a 6 out of 10, often the price is a lot lower. And if you're getting an 8 or 9 or a 10 out of 10 shirt, you're going to pay a little bit more. But at least, you know, you can budget accordingly. You can, you know, get something that fits your budget. Yes, you might lose a little bit of the quality level if you're on a budget, but at least you know it's open, it's transparent. It's a great way to buy shirts. Another place you can buy shirts that I've had a decent amount of success with is eBay. There's a lot of selection on eBay. Of course, it's sellers from the public. It's just the general public selling on there. So you will see a bit of everything, you know, and you'll see things on eBay that you won't see anywhere, that you may not even see in classic football shirts, because people put anything on there. You know, you get bootleg stuff, you get old training gear that nobody ever knows existed, but it's real and it's there and you can find it on eBay. Quite often the prices are quite reasonable on eBay as well, because a lot of the time people just want to be rid of stuff, so they put it on eBay, get it sold. So you do get some bargains, particularly if you get something on an auction, you know, and you catch a good auction and nobody else spots it. You might get a real bargain. And it's proper kind of vintage, pre-owned vibes, if you like. So the shirts look lived in, they look worn, a lot of them. Again, you're not going to get a 10 out of 10 mint condition shirt on eBay, I wouldn't imagine. They're lived in. And for that reason, I think it's great. For me, that's what I like. I like a shirt to have a history. The ones on eBay certainly do have a history. You do get fakes on there, though. That's the only problem. It's not regulated in the same way that classic football shirts is. They're not authenticated in the same manner. A lot of the time you have to take people's word for it and really know what you're looking for to spot a fake, because they do exist on eBay. And there's not a ton of emphasis on the seller to prove their authenticity. Of course, if they can, it helps them sell it, but they don't have to do it. So if they want to just say to you, oh, I don't know if it's a real one or a fake one, they can. And, you know, that's up to them. Of course, then you may not buy it, but just eBay is great, but do your research and be wary on eBay. But the big one that everybody always asks me about is Vinted, because Vinted is the way that people buy and sell secondhand clothes these days, conveniently, quickly. And I get it. I use Vinted. I don't use it much for football shirts, but particularly selling old items of clothing, I do use Vinted for that. And people do put football shirts on there. The problem with Vinted is and I look occasionally just to see if there's the odd thing that might look genuine. There's so many fakes on Vinted. So many fakes. I've done it. You know, I've bought shirts on Vinted thinking, that looks good. You know, you buy it because it looks genuine. The photos look genuine. It says authentic, and it arrives in the post and it's clearly a fake. It happens. So be very, very careful when shopping on Vinted would be my suggestion. There are bargains to be had on Vinted, and you can get real ones on there. 2 success stories that I've had. I mentioned the England shirt, 2020 England shirt. I bought one on Vinted that is genuine, and I knew what to look for, so I knew it looked like a genuine one. It was being sold by a Chelsea fan who, because it has Mount on the back, he said, I just want rid of it because I hate Mason Mount because he's gone to Manchester United and abandoned us. So I messaged him and said, well, I'll take it because I'm a United fan and I'm quite happy to have a Mason Mount shirt to go with our new signing. So I bought it, about 20 quid, I think. Nothing wrong with it, and it is a genuine shirt. I bought my best Vinted find was a France 98 training top, and it wasn't like a for a particular nation. It was one of the ones that was made for the tournament, by the organisers. But it was in really good nick. They are collectible. They're quite rare. And I found one of those on Vinted for 20 quid again. But I think for every genuine one you see, there's 200 fakes on Vinted. So just be very careful. Quite often in charity shops, you do see football shirts in charity shops. Very rare that you'll find a really, really good find in the charity shop. I've got a friend who once found a Blackburn Rovers 94-95 season shirt. So the Premier League winning season for them, Sheeran, Sutton and all of that. They found that shirt in a charity shop, the home one with McEwen's Lager on it. Really nice shirt, really good. And it was in a charity shop for like 15 quid. So, it can happen, charity shops. I think you're more likely to find old running gear in a charity shop than you are a vintage football shirt, but worth a look. If you're into modern shirts, outlet shops are very good. Like Adidas outlets or Nike outlets or, occasional sports outlet shops, sometimes like a TK Maxx. You do find them in there. They're more modern. You're not going to get your vintage ones in there, but worth a look if you're into your modern shirts for sure. I do recommend outlet shops for that. Now, let me give you some tips about buying authentic shirts online. Now, the big thing to do is to make sure you're not buying a fake, of course. So when you're looking out for fakes, there's a few things that I've sort of learned along the way. And to be honest, the first tip is an obvious one. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. That's the truth of it. If somebody is selling a Mexico 1998 home shirt for £25 on Vinted and they're saying it's authentic, I can almost guarantee you it's not. Nobody in their right mind, unless they're ill-informed, is gonna sell that for that price. They're just not going to do it because they could get £100, £200, £300, depending on the quality, for it if you sell it in the right place. So there's no way someone is selling it for that price. So to be honest, use your head a bit. That's what I would say. That's my biggest tip. If it seems too good to be true, it is. And look at the tags as well. I've knocked David Beckham over again. Look at the tags as well, because the tags are a bit of a telltale sign. Nike and Adidas have their own sort of numbered system that you can use. So there's codes that are on the tags that you can Google, and depending on what comes up, you'll have a real one or a fake one. Compare tags to real ones. If you've got a Manchester United home shirt from the season before and you're looking at another season around that time, look at the tags of the one you've got and see how they compare to the ones that is being sold online. Often, that's a real giveaway. I tell you one thing I have noticed as well, the couple of times that I have come across fakes in person and I've had them in my hand, you can see on the labels sometimes that there is a bit of biro where somebody's written a number or some lettering or something. That's a bit of a red flag, or that should be a red flag for you as a buyer, that this is a fake. That's a bit of a known thing that will happen in the sort of factories that are mass producing these fake shirts. A little bit of handwriting on the label. It's a simple thing, but keep an eye out for it. And to be honest, another really obvious one, just use your eyes. You will have seen the shirt that you're wanting to buy on TV probably 1 million times, worn by all the players, worn by all the fans. You've seen people out on the street wearing it. You know the shirt. So if you look at the shirt online or you look at it in a shop and it just doesn't look quite right and you can't quite put your finger on it, but you know something's off, then something's off. Don't buy it. Our brains are amazing, and they will know sometimes that something about that shirt that you're looking at just doesn't seem right. If you get that intuition, don't buy it. Now for today's From the Stash pick, which is the section of the pod where I pull out a football shirt from my collection and discuss it with you, talk about why I've got it, I've gone for this. Now, this is the first time on this podcast that I have worn a training top. This is not a football shirt. This is actually a training top from Juventus from the 2003-2004 season. It was made by Nike, as you can see from the logo right there. This is a Nike shirt from that sort of just before the sort of Total 90 era. Do you remember the Nike adverts from back in the day? The cage football Nike advert from around this time, I think, with Eric Cantona, where he goes, "Winner stays on, loser goes home." And then it's like Zidane and Ronaldo and Ronaldinho and Totti and Beckham, and they're all in the cage playing football. Absolutely. That is the best football advert of all time. Maybe we need to do a pod where we talk about the best football advert of all time. I'm going to note that down because that is a brilliant... I'll tell you what else I really want to do at some point. I'm going off on a relevant tangent. I want to do a pod where I talk about the most iconic title sequences from World Cups. Because for me, when I was young, I always used to look forward to the BBC and the ITV opening titles. And there's been some absolute bangers over the years in those title sequences. Remember the Sing Sing Africa song? I think it was from the ITV South Africa World Cup. Nessun Dorma from Italia 90. You've got... Wasn't the one for... I think it was the BBC. Wasn't it a song from West Side Story that they used for the World Cup 94? The one that's like, "When they're singing America." That one. They had that. So we could rank all of those, go through all of them for the 90s and the 2000s, put them in order of, best to worst. Just an idea. Let me know if you'd like that down below. But we're actually talking about this training top from Juventus from 2003. I got this from Classic Football Shirts. That'll be no surprise to you. And it was only £50, which for classic football shirts is very cheap. The majority of what you buy there is usually over 100. I actually didn't plan to buy this, but I saw it, quite liked it, thought I'll try that one on. Took it into the dressing room. And I loved it. It fit me well. It's a nice light shirt. Some of them you wear from that time period, they feel quite weighty. And that's good because it gives it the baggy look. But this, it's baggy, but it also is just so light, like it just sits on your body. This is around the time where football shirts were getting a bit more advanced in their technology, their breathability. And it was becoming... not so much about the sort of baggy look and more about the sporty vibe. And I quite like it. I'm more of a 90s guy, as you know. But for me, I just loved this. I had to buy it when I put it on. And that's the good thing about the shop as well. The Classic Football Shirt shop. When you go in there, you can try them on. I know it sounds obvious, but you see these shirts online. Sometimes you have to take a punt, get them home and try them on. In Classic Football Shirts, you can pot around and you can try them on. You can only do 4 at a time though. But I quite often have more than 4 in my hand. So I give some to the guy behind the till and ask him to hold on for them for you. So, you can use them for that as well. But this was a must-have when I tried it on. I really like this one. I quite like training gear. I've never talked about this before, but I do have a soft spot for training gear from that time period. I feel like with the training gear, even today, football clubs are quite experimental with it sometimes. They do things with training gear they wouldn't do on normal football shirts. And they can be a bit different and they can, be a bit artistic and all of that. And often as well, the training gear is a little bit cheaper. You can buy training gear for less than football shirts. So if you're wanting to start a collection of, vintage football shirts and different pieces, training gear could be a nice entry point into that. Because as I said, this was only $49.99 for a vintage. This is almost... How many years are we talking now? This is 23 years old. So it's still a vintage piece, but it was the fraction of a price of a football shirt from this time period. So if you want to start your collection somewhere, you've not got a massive budget, maybe training wear is the way to go. And they're a bit more different training tops as well. Quite often when I wear a training shirt to, out to work or, out wherever, people quite often will say, I've not seen that one before. Where did you get that from? What is that you're wearing there? Because people they're a bit more unfamiliar. So again, it's an excuse to chat football with somebody. Wear a different sort of top to what people are used to. You're going to get people ask you questions about it. And I quite like that. And this Juventus side as well, back in the day, it was baller central. Who've you got? You've got Nedved, you've got Del Piero, Buffon. Obviously Buffon. Oh no, Buffon might have worn this. I don't know. Maybe he joined in the outfield training. Some goalkeepers did. Peter Schmeichel used to do that at Manchester United when he signed. He said, I want to join in the training. And they said, you've got your goalkeeper training over there. And he was like, no, I want to do this. Particularly in the modern era, football training is for all, not just for outfield players, goalkeepers too. But back in the day, Buffon, yes, he was part of the squad. Trezeguet would have worn this. Zambrotta, wall-to-wall legends. A great period for Italian football. Was Football Italia still on Channel 4? Around this time? I think it had probably gone by then. It was more of a 90s staple, wasn't it? But, you know, the shirt itself, it's 2000s energy. It was a special era for Nike, as I mentioned, and that kind of drew me in as well to buying it. So there you go. Little tip for you. Training tops for the win. Right, that is it for Kiss the Badge for this week. Thank you so much for being here for another pod. Do engage with us on social media. Those platforms are at Kiss the Badge Pod, and particularly on YouTube. Please, please, please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube so that I can grow things, make more content for you, make better content for you. This pod improves the more that you guys get behind it. So please do, if you like the pod. I'm not forcing anyone to subscribe to anything, but if you've got a minute and you're up for it, I would love you to subscribe, particularly on YouTube, so that we can grow things. Thanks for listening. I will see you next time. And in the meantime, if you love the shirt, don't forget to kiss the badge. See you next time.